Thank you. I won't give much of an introduction, but I will show you this. I brought it from my office today. It says NUX 5. As some of you might know, NUX used to have annual conferences, and NUX 5 was 2016, so it's physical proof that I've been coming to NUX for 10 or so years. But it's my first time giving a talk, and first time giving a talk full stop, I think. Sandwich. You're making a sandwich for somebody. Discovery on a sandwich is relatively straightforward. You may ask, what would you like in your sandwich? After delivery of the sandwich, you may ask, how was your sandwich? Measure the success of the sandwich. The next day, let's say you go to work and you're a designer working on a revolutionary new aeroplane, a new passenger airliner. Discovery on an aeroplane is a bit different from the sandwich, famously. You're collaborating with teams across the world, working on different parts of the aeroplane, endless complexities, endless regulations, endless technicalities, and the risk is as high as it gets. So, in theory, one poor design choice could be a risk to human life. So, we could put these two discoveries on this chart. We've got risks up one axis and unknowns increasing up the other axis. And I think if we did that, we'd intuitively do this. And I think, for me, there's something helpful in this somehow about product design and discovery. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some discovery that I've done in my career and what I mean by sandwich and aeroplane. And then a little later on, I'll talk about AI and why I think it's changing things and why I think this is kind of important right now. And when I say discovery, for the purposes of these slides, I mean everything before delivery. So you might define discovery as the problem bit, but just for these slides, I'm going to go for everything. I'll go for the problem bit and the solution bit, which are the two halves of discovery as they fit in my simple brain. So the problem is often called build the right thing. I always have to stop and think which way around that is. And then the solution is build the thing right. And I think we could pop those on the chart. So if we're dealing with a situation of high risks and high unknowns, I think the focus should generally be on the problem. And if we're in a situation of low risks and low unknowns, then I think we're in solution territory. And I think we could go a step further. We could actually define discovery as moving from problem to solution, and moving from higher risks and unknowns to low risks and unknowns. And this is not a new thing. So this diagram by Jeanette Fincello I came across a few years ago and was super helpful at the time. And Marty Kagan and Janisa Torres, if you've come across them, also talk about discovery as reducing risks. I'm just going to frame it slightly differently, in a way that works for me, and they don't talk about sandwiches, so I'm going to kick it up a notch. So, risks and unknowns, I think, stand as terms in their own right, but we could break them down like this, but I'll come back to this. I'll give some examples and then come back to this slide and talk about what I mean. So, discovery one. This is from my current job a year or two ago. And it's health and safety forms and documents. Not very exciting, potentially, but there it is, it's fine. And there's part of the UI which tells the user the status of the document. So it could be draft or in progress or under review or complete, or something like that. And my colleague Dave found from the data that 27,000 users clicked this thing, I think 110,000 times in 90 days. Unfortunately, it's not interactive. It never has been, and it doesn't do anything. So we had a problem. That's the spark for our discovery. And so at that point, we could think, what are the potential risks and unknowns? And I think in this case, we would probably have ruled out a few of these. But you could say, well, there's some user risks here, potentially. We could move this thing, or remove it entirely, or restyle it, and end up removing something that's really useful and make it worse. There's technical risks, because this is legacy, very complex software that's very difficult to change. And user unknowns, maybe there's some deeper problem here that we haven't uncovered about how users want to move through the state of the document. So let's try and put this on the chart. I'm going to ask for hands up. And I'll give you two choices. And I just wonder, intuitively, do you think this feels like a really high risks and high unknowns, aeroplane kind of discovery? Hands up if you think so. Yeah. So hands up if you think maybe it's in sandwich territory. It's low risks and low unknowns. Yeah. I think it's down there. And I think we could give this segment a name. I think we could call it Launch and Learn. And I think down here, I think the focus is on the solution. And that's how we approached it. Discovery took 30 minutes. And it was me and Figma just saying, look, I can see this doesn't look right. Let's restyle it. We'll move it there because that seems like a better place. And we'll just do it and measure it again and see what happens and go from there. And that's what we did. And the clicks went down. And that was good enough. And this kind of thing helps my little brain, because it's very common to hear people say that we should always launch and learn, we should always ship and measure, but for many designers and organizations and projects, that is true, and that's maybe the zone they're always in, but for me, a lot of discovery starts in a different kind of place. Next discovery, again. So, this was at a legal tech company that I used to work for, and it's a product that we had that supported families when somebody had died. And part of that experience was a member of the ops team getting on the phone with a family and spending often an hour or so collecting important information. And the ops team member was entering the information on a spreadsheet, which is not great. It's not a good thing to follow for a phone script, and data would get lost, and we'd have to call the family back, and it wasn't scalable. There was no way to use the data in a scalable way. So that's the spark for our discovery. And so at that point, we might think ahead and think, what are the possible risks and unknowns of this discovery? And if we did that, I think we'd rule out a few of them. But there's possible user risks here, so there's the chance that we build something that's no better than the spreadsheet and isn't really suitable for a phone call at what's a really important moment for the family. There's technical risks, but not super high in this case. The company is a startup and it's a modern tech stack. It's a greenfield project. It's not super high risk. Business risks, so there's a chance that we don't really build anything, spend a lot of time and don't build anything that really unlocks any scale for the business. And it's a really important, sensitive moment for the family. So there's a potential trust and brand risk, maybe. unknowns, so we, at this point, didn't really know what the experience was like on the phone call, and the tools that the ops team were using, we didn't know the science and flows and the value proposition that we needed. And there were some technical unknowns, we didn't know what we were building, so. And I won't ask for hands up this time, but I just put this in the middle of the chart. I think this is a kind of a mix. So this is medium risks and medium unknowns in my head. And for me, that suggests a discovery with a balance of problem and solution. So for us, the problem bit meant we had a round of interviews with our ops team. We listened in on the customer calls. We asked the team about their experience using the spreadsheet, and we understood what we needed to do with the data and so on. And then pretty quickly we got to the solution bit, and we were prototyping and testing internally and designing the thing. And it went really well. And it's the project I look back on fondly. But final discovery. This is a company that will remain anonymous. And it's a company that sold a product on a more or less one-off basis. Maybe customers would come back after a year or so, but it was more or less a one-off purchase. One of the co-founders said, I've thought for years, this isn't really right, and this should be a subscription model. So I think we should move everybody to a subscription model. Okay, that's the start of our discovery. There's the challenge, the problem. And so at this point, we might think, what are the potential risks and unknowns? And maybe we'll rule out operational in this case. But we've got some user risks. We've got the risk that they don't want to pay the subscription and they don't sign up. There's technical risks. So this was spoiled up, going to involve every one of the 3 product squads at this company, which is a small company, for 3 months or so. And so there's a huge risk in terms of opportunity lost on other things we could be working on, and just very complex technically in terms of transitioning between these payment models on the website, in the app, and so on. The business risks is probably the easiest one, so you totally change your pricing, and on day one there's the risk of dropping revenue, there's a risk to profit and churn. There's market risks, maybe the market's not ready for this, and it's not how people want to pay for this kind of product. User unknowns, so we didn't really know how users felt about buying our product. We didn't really know their mental models and their experiences paying for comparable products. Technical unknowns, it's just very complicated that we didn't know what the flows and the experience would have to be at this point. Market unknowns, we weren't super clear on the competition, how they were charging, and so on. And a lot of these are not in the ballpark of a designer to kind of work out, but it's just about an awareness, I think. So, I'll ask for hands up again, but I think you know where this is going. So, hands up if you think this is sandwich territory. So, super low risk, super low unknowns, launch and learn. No? Hands up if you think maybe this is aeroplane territory, high risk and high unknowns for this company. Yeah, I agree with that. For this company, this is a high risk and high unknowns kind of discovery. And for these sorts of discovery, I think the focus is best on the problem. So in this case, that may have meant a round of interviews with our customers to try and ask about their experiences paying for our product and paying for similar products. Competitor analysis, checking all the data about churn and so on. And if I was to ask you, like, how many weeks of problem discovery do you think is reasonable for this? I mean, I think that's a very difficult question to answer. But if what has ever popped into your head is sort of around 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 4 weeks, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, or something like that. Maybe 2 at a push. Yeah. So we did no weeks of problem discovery. And the co-founder said, well, we're going to disorder what you do. If you got some data, if you've done some discovery that we don't know about, and I was going, well, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. Well, can we do some discovery? Because I think we probably should do some interviews. And we're going to do it. So we did it, and we worked very hard on making it as good as we possibly could. We did a lot of solution discovery, a lot of solution design, but we had a goal of 1,000 subscribers within a month or 2, I think. We got 6. And the amount of money this company was losing per month at that point, I'm not going to tell you, but it was a lot. And within a few months, a significant proportion of the workforce had been laid off, including me. And I think this was a pattern for the company of arguably taking an aeroplane and treating it like a sandwich, by which I mean making big bets and not doing appropriate discovery on them, and it didn't always work out. But an aeroplane does not equal a sandwich, famously. But this company's doing great, and I had a lovely time there, and this is hard. This is really hard, and there's various examples from outside my career of similar things, and Airbnb Plus is really worth looking up if you haven't heard of it. It's an example of where Airbnb took a known problem and applied totally the wrong solution and lost a lot of money, lost a lot of opportunity, time, and so on, before they went back and changed it. So it's really interesting. It's worth looking up. All right, AI. Finally, okay. So if this chart represents all of discovery, then I think AI is impacting every corner of this chart in some way or another. I think the part of this chart where it's impacting the most is the bottom left, the solution bit, low risks and unknowns. And if there's one word I'd use to describe that, I'd just say code. I think designers are increasingly expected to be in the code base or deliver prototypes in code, and just generally blur the line between code and design in a potentially exciting way. It depends what day you catch me on as to how positive I feel about it, but I feel good about it, I think. And then the top right of the chart, if there was one word I'd pick for that, just to oversimplify, I'd go human. And I think this area of high risks and high unknowns is the space where we really benefit from leaning on human qualities like strategic thinking and problem solving, collaboration, organizational awareness, politics within an organization, empathy, listening to users. And that's not to say there's no benefit of AI up there. I think it can be helping our problem discovery. And it's not to say there's no human down in the solution bit, in the code bit. I think it's incredibly important. But potentially the role of a designer was changing it to something which is less about producing many figure screens and more about how we'll direct an AI, how we view it with our expertise and our knowledge and use it to come up with a great solution. So the final discovery is one which I'm doing at the moment, and it maybe it includes AI. And it's my current company, and this is a sustainability product, and we're building something new to help companies track the greenhouse gas emissions of their supply chain. And I think I'd put it in the middle of the chart. It's medium risks, medium unknowns, balance of problem and solution. And discovery started in a fairly familiar way, with familiar tools for me. So I've got a Miro board, I love a Miro board. I've got Figma, doing user interviews, working very collaboratively, working with lovely Neil, product manager, working with experts in the team, sort of 3 rounds of interviews, some early designs. But we've got some AI creeping in here. We've got something called UX Pilot, which I've used for early design ideas. We've got ChatGPT, which I've used as a mentor to help me understand the subject area and to help a bit with summarizing transcripts and research synthesis, affinity mapping, with mixed results, but it was helpful. But it's maybe more interesting where we've actually got to now, and we're really into the solution phase now. And rather than refining the designs in Figma, which I would have done previously, I've built a coded prototype. So I took the context of the discovery, all the designs we had, everything we'd learned, and I kind of worked with ChatGPT and Claude, and Claude in the background of this thing, VS Code over there, to build a prototype. So this is now our source of truth, and when we're in the room now with engineers, we're not looking at Figma, we're looking at this. And this is sort of my tool of choice, believe it or not, at the moment, for this project. So I'm not really in Figma, I'm in this thing. I mean, look at it. It's like all those words I don't understand. And it's not any buttons. It's some days I just don't know really what's happened to me. But it's actually quite liberating in a way. I can move really quickly with it. And also I've run around the interviews now with this prototype and run some usability tests with users. And rather than them clicking through some Figma screens, they can add data and delete it and leave comments and leave uploads and go through various workflows here. And that's a much richer level of interaction than I could have got with Figma screens. And it's much easier to change. So it's not, my workflow changes every week. And it's not perfect, but it is kind of exciting on a good day. And I think for me, thinking about sandwiches and aeroplanes helps me probably more than ever now because of AI, for a couple of reasons. One is, it's easier than ever to vibe code something. Anybody can do this in an organization. Vibe code a solution that looks great, it looks amazing, it looks like it's probably going to be brilliant, and it's very tempting to do it and to build it. But if we take a step back and think, what are the risks and unknowns here, and are we actually in a high risk, high unknowns situation, then I think it's useful for designers to have a way of thinking about that and a language around it, and to advocate for discovery when it's appropriate. And the second reason I think it's important is if we're actually in the low risks and no unknowns space as a designer, then we should probably be moving with the times and trying to work with AI and move a little quicker, not be too afraid to adapt. But this bit with the aeroplanes is a zone you can't vibe code your way out of. You can't vibe code an aeroplane. There's the quote. Yeah. So for me, this kind of framework helps. And I'm doing a discovery on this talk. So I would love to know what you think after this. And I think this is medium risks, medium unknowns. There is a risk. I've just stood here and not made any sense and wasted your time. And there are definitely unknowns. I genuinely don't know if what I've said is relevant to you, is interesting, at all. So please let me know what you think. And thank you very much for listening.